Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and welcome to the fourth and final part of my response to Jamie and Shaba's attack on J.K. Rowling. Thank you for the very nice and positive feedback on this new experimental venture of mine. It makes it feel worthwhile, and I look forward to doing more response videos in future, though I might not choose such a long one to respond to next time. If you are able to, please do share my videos on Twitter, Facebook, Spinster, wherever. The Jammidodger channel, which is the name of Jamie's channel, gains thousands of new subscribers every week, and I don't. But that's okay, I'm not bitter. And to be fair, their channel has been going for about 9 years now, and I only started seriously this year, so I guess anything can happen. It has been hard choosing what else I should respond to in their dreadful video and what to leave out. They do come out with several of the awful arguments that I have already covered in my series on transgender ideology, and I really can't be bothered to revisit them here. I'd rather focus on other things. Firstly, I want to reiterate a point that I made about trans people. In their introduction, they say this.
In this case, there's a gender critical perspective that Rowling supports here, and there's a trans community's perspective.
So they called it a gender critical perspective there, but throughout their video, they tend to use the more nasty sounding term trans exclusionist. And as I said in my first video, they talk about the trans community's perspective as if there is only one perspective, as if all trans people think the same, which is not the case. So the problem with this,
if a large group of trans people are telling you that something is wrong, please listen to them.
Is which large group of people should we listen to because they don't all speak with one voice? Here's an idea. Listen to all of them, examine their arguments, look to see what evidence there is in support of them, and then either accept or reject them on that basis. In other words, treat them like anyone else. I will never stop saying this, but arguments stand or fall on their own merits. Suggesting that just because trans people say something, it must be right, is a fallacious appeal to authority. Trans people have written articles in national journals, they've made videos, appeared on TV, or just tweeted in support of J.K. Rowling. And typically, as is the case with everyone who dares to disagree publicly with the line being pushed by the fanatics, they've copped some abuse for it. As I also said in the first video, Jamie and Shaba do condemn the abuse meted out by trans activists, but they don't do themselves any favours, and I'll say more about that in this video. I'm afraid I will be doing what I've managed to avoid doing in my first 3 videos so far, and showing examples of this abuse. We'll start here.
J.K. Rowling says she mentioned this because she knew what would happen when supporting Maya, violent threats, being told she's literally killing people with her hate, to be called slurs, and to have her books burned.
Again, threats of violence are never okay from either side, and saying that she's literally killing thousands of people with her hate is an exaggeration.
It's not an exaggeration, it's an outright lie. It's a totally unhinged thing to say, but it is lifted from the gender fanatic playbook. Similar is said about me. I wonder how many people my words have killed. And from the same playbook.
But there's an element of truth that this hate that come from gender critical views that this essay supports can cause these levels of hurt.
Hate that comes from gender critical views. Sorry, saying biological sex matters, that it's immutable, that it's fine to be gender non-conforming, but gender is an oppressive, socially constructed straitjacket. How is that hate? And what are these levels of hurt that can be spoken about in the same sentence as literally killing thousands of people? Somewhere in their video, Shaba talks about the terrible distress of people who loved Harry Potter so much. They even got Harry Potter tattoos, and they would celebrate the pride by dressing up as Harry Potter characters. And now they feel terribly betrayed. Well, get over yourselves.
Remember, J.K. Rowling's essay is already being used as a way to justify the restriction of trans rights.
And the evidence is a headline from the reputable, scholarly, and totally unbiased journal Pink News. Okay, let's have a look. Republican Senator James Lankford blocked Senate consideration of the Equality Act and LGBTQ Civil Rights Bill. Here is a clip of him using J.K. Rowling's essay to justify the restriction of trans rights.
Come on, let's work together. We don't want anyone to be discriminated against, anyone. But we can do this in a way that accommodates everyone, and that we can actually work towards agreement. Or to say it in the words of J.K. Rowling this past week, where she wrote, "All I'm asking, all I want, is for similar empathy, similar understanding to be extended to the many millions of women whose sole crime is wanting their concerns to be heard without receiving threats or abuse." Let's work together to get equality. This bill does not do it in this form.
So he quotes the very last sentence in JK's essay about women wanting to be heard without being abused. And JK is at fault for writing such terrible, hateful and transphobic words in the first place. Women wanting to be heard, how dare we? By the way, the bill in question is opposed by radical feminists and conservative women alike on the grounds that it threatens to erase protections for women, protections that benefit women and society as a whole. Legislative and policy reforms proposed in this dangerous bill will lead to blatant violations of our safety, privacy, and dignity. Under this bill, men and boys will take away women's small business grants and hard-won spots on sports teams. They will be allowed to live in women's domestic violence shelters and use our locker rooms. And united as women, we are just not going to stand for it. In other words, what Jamie calls the restriction of trans rights is keeping rights to the level that they are at, rather than extending them so that they start negatively impacting on women's rights. Jamie and Shaba are in total denial about the impact on women's rights. Somewhere in their video, Shaba says she can't think of a single right she loses by including trans-identifying men. This is an extraordinary admission. To anyone similarly struggling to think of what possible way that going along with the lie that males can be women can hurt women, I would suggest removing the blinkers and paying a visit to my website at peaktrans.org. Check out the pages on sports, on sex-segregated spaces, on crime, prisons, erasure, where you will find thousands of links to articles that might aid your comprehension. Now, onto the Abuse Olympics.
Regardless of what someone's views are and whether you agree with it or not, threats of abuse are absolutely never okay.
The trans community has valid arguments against trans exclusionist points.
So why aren't you sharing them instead of the load of cobblers you brought us in this video?
But threats really weaken this.
No, if you had valid arguments, they would stand up to scrutiny. They would persuade all of us of your perspective, and trans activists wouldn't resort to such vile abuse and so quickly. The very reason they do is because your arguments, such as they exist at all, don't hold up. Those who accept them do so because they either suspend their ability to think critically or they don't have that ability in the first place.
And we 100% do not condone this kind of behaviour. However, it's only a minority that act this way, and we can't take that wrong behaviour of the minority and group it onto the majority who do not behave in this way. We've spoken to people who have shared articles saying, oh, look how horrible trans people are being. And there are literal collections of screenshots of trans people or trans allies saying very negative things about J.K. Rowling. Of course, those tweets are not cool, but it's also not cool to collect them and act like this is all that's happening.
No, we certainly shouldn't act like that is all that's happening. Let's not forget the people trying to get JK cancelled as an author. That worked out well. Then there are the attempts to intimidate and bully women who want to meet to discuss the impact of gender ideology on our lives.
Walk of shame! Walk of shame! Walk of shame! Walk of shame!
Sportswomen being displaced and treated by men who claim to be women. The violations of women and girls in our own spaces. But what does any of this matter compared to your regret of your Harry Potter tattoo, eh, guys? However, in addition to raising awareness of all those things, it is cool to have collections of tweets saying very negative things, which has got to be the biggest understatement ever, about J.K. Rowling or about feminists generally, because of what they reveal about some trans people. Whether they are a minority or not, and I'm not sure how you would know since most online abusers are anonymous, doesn't matter. Only a minority of men abuse women in real life, but because some do, and we aren't going to know which ones they are, we don't want any of them in our spaces, however they identify. In any event, even if it is only a minority of trans people who behave like this, and I am quite prepared to believe that it is still a hell of a lot of abuse from a lot of different people. But it is the nature of that abuse that Jamie and Shaba are ignoring when they say this.
People on both sides are mean.
Now, I'm not going to disagree that there are mean people or people who say mean things on all sides, because there are more than two sides. As I said in part 2 of my response, there are people who are genuinely transphobic and who say really appalling things about wanting to beat up and kill trans people. When I first launched my website 3 years ago, I collected a bunch of these comments to put on the page I call Real Transphobes. And on it, I make the point that these people don't seem to get targeted by trans activists, possibly because they are almost invariably men, and trans activists are far more inclined to pick on women for some reason. There is also the thing about them not actually having any argument, whereas we do. Another issue with Jamie and Shaba's use of the term trans exclusionist, it makes all of us who would disagree with them sound the same, even though we are driven by very different concerns. And those of us who are concerned with women's rights do not advocate violence and murder. In fact, these comments from transphobes against trans people are really quite similar to the kind of comments made by trans activists against gender critical feminists, except not as bad. They don't go into as much gruesome detail, but the main thing that's missing are the sexual references, which are a very common feature of trans activist abuse. Take, for example, the screenshot that flashed up on the screen when Jamie was speaking. A closer look at that screenshot reveals it to be a collection in which every single comment involves telling J.K. Rowling to suck a dick. And here is another collection calling her a bitch or a cunt. These are, as Shaba might say, a teeny, tiny fraction of the disgusting and vicious comments I've seen directed at J.K. Rowling. Then there are the blogs and articles and the YouTube videos, all absolutely hateful and lacking in reason and evidence. And yet J.K. Rowling gets criticised by Jamie and Shaba for not allowing such people to comment directly on her blog.
It's also not the strongest standpoint to be championing freedom of speech in a blog post where you disable comments, and also disable replies on tweets that you write on the matter. We are here as a trans person and an ally, actively encouraging everyone to have a sensible discussion on this matter. You are there not allowing people to respond, and yet you're saying one of the reasons you're afraid of trans activism is protecting free speech.
Unbelievable. To be fair, Jamie and Shaba do get abused too. Here we go.
In under 5 minutes, I could collate so many horrific screenshots of what trans exclusionists have said to Jamie. He receives these every single day. He's been called so many things.
Delusional, an idiot, a f***ing freak, a Ked, a freak show, a pretend dress-up person, batshit crazy, insane, a human that ruins America.
I receive it too. I receive verbal sexual assault threats from men for just being with a trans guy, and this is as a cis woman.
A dick, a dishonest, misogynistic, homophobic twerp.
Neither of these sides are innocent.
So Shaba claims, and I believe her, that she has received threats of sexual assault for being with Jamie. Does this abuse come from gender-critical feminists? No, of course it doesn't. Lesbians in particular routinely get this kind of abuse, and I'll wager it comes from the same kind of men who say they want to kill trans people. As for the comments received by Jamie, it could just be me, but I do see quite a big difference between calling someone an idiot or a dick or insane, delusional, and telling someone to choke on your dick, or this. There are hundreds more where they came from. Getting called words to the effect of "you're stupid" or "crazy" is an occupational hazard of speaking out on a controversial topic. I get called all those and much worse, whatever topic I've ever spoken out on, but the stuff from trans activists is far, far worse than anything I've ever seen. By the way, if you repeatedly call women who are concerned about the effect of trans ideology on our sex-based rights transphobic, and if you slag off an organisation specifically set up for gay people because they feel they need one, don't be surprised if you get called misogynist and homophobe. Now, I'm not saying these petty insults directed at Jamie aren't unkind, and to call a trans person a freak seems unnecessarily cruel to me, but these aren't threats. These do not reveal a desire to sexually abuse and kill anyone. And they're not demonstrable untruths told to hundreds of thousands of people about named individuals, which is what this video of Jamie and Shaba does, and which makes this comment seem exquisitely ironic to me.
Freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. Use your freedom of speech, sure, but if you use it to lie about trans people and to generate fear, you're gonna get called out for it.
Right back at you, except that in your case it is more hate than fear that your video is intended to generate. Right, in my final clip, we revisit their favourite and still undefined concept.
And regardless, if you said the gender identity doesn't exist and someone calls you a bad word, you're still saying the gender identity doesn't exist.
Well, actually, if we say that women are adult human female, that biology matters, that being a woman isn't a subjective feeling or idea, and someone tells us to choke on their lady dick or die in a dumpster fire, many of us are even more disinclined to believe this concept of gender identity has any value. Why would someone who claims to know they're a woman up here even think of saying something like that to a woman? Could the answer perhaps be less to do with gender identity than with some deeply ingrained misogyny? Think about it. Right, that's all from me on this particular video. I hope to be back soon with something else. Thanks for watching. Bye.